Hi, my name is Courtney Gardiner, and this is my story for His glory. When I was growing up, me and my dad were always fairly close, but there had been a lot of stuff that had happened in our lives, in our relationship as I was growing up. Just a lot of times when I just rebelled and kind of withdrew from our relationship. Just a lot of hurt and unforgiveness that had kind of over the years crept into our hearts towards one another. Growing up, I always just felt like I had this void in my heart, and I tried to fill it with anything and everything. And, I didn't know God. So anything from food to drugs to alcohol to unhealthy relationships with guys, that really affected my relationship with my dad. For the longest time, I just longed to know that he loved me. Your dad is the one that's called to reflect the Father heart of God to you. And for so many years and for so long, I focused on all the ways in which my earthly dad fell short of that. And when I focused on that, the void got bigger and bigger and bigger, and nothing could fill it. And I always just felt this anger and this pain in my heart that I wanted my dad to be a better father and tell me he loved me and tell me I was a princess and tell me he wanted to spend time with me. And I just had that empty void in my heart until I met Christ. When I gave my life to Christ, over time, God started to show me that I had this unforgiveness and hurt in my heart. Years back, there was this one Father's Day, I just decided I was going to have this conversation with my dad and just share my heart with him and be face to face with him. And I had set out to say all of the ways in which I felt like he hurt me or let me down or didn't reflect God's heart to me. I had set out to write this letter and I was going to read it to him, and I felt like this was the right thing to do because I needed to face him in relationship. And when I sat down to write the letter, God completely gripped my heart and convicted me. Just showed me things from a different perspective and actually told me, Courtney, I need you to repent to your dad. Repent for your disobedience. Repent for your unforgiveness in your heart. And then just honor your dad and honor him for who he is and how he did reflect me to you as you grew up. And so it completely shifted everything. And so I sat down and I wrote this letter, and the letter turned out to be completely different than what I had set out to do. I just sat before him and I just said, Dad, I need to share my heart with you. I have some things that I want to speak to you about. And it was definitely out of our comfort zone. But I just knew in my heart God had gripped my heart to do this thing. I just read my letter with all the sincerity in my heart that I could, and everything that God had showed me, I just laid it all out for him. And we just both sat there in tears. And in that moment, I knew God was doing something new in our relationship and in our family. I knew that God was setting out to reconcile our hearts. This would have been the first time in years that we had talked about all the hurt. He just wept and just said, this is the best gift anyone has ever given me. And I know that he actually keeps that letter to this day. And now what that looks like in our relationship is that we can have those conversations now. God has completely restored our relationship, and we can talk openly about those things like we never were able to before. And about a year later, the following Father's Day, I had sent my dad a card, again, just honoring him in that card and telling him that I loved him and that I was grateful that he was my dad. He called me a couple days later and he just said, I just had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to call you and share some things with you. And I often think these things about you, but I don't say them openly or out loud to you. And I just felt like I was supposed to. So I just want to call you and thank you for the card that you sent me. And I just want to tell you how proud I am of you. And he went on to just say that he was so proud of me. And one thing that I'll never forget is he said, I'm so grateful that God chose you to be my daughter. And I'll never forget that. And that just healed so much in my heart. I never even had to talk about all the unforgiveness I had, because such a healing came from our previous conversation and that one. Now we just walk in that restoration. And I'm just so grateful that the shift that has taken place and that we can walk in the fullness of what God has for us in our relationship. And now when I go to visit him in Winnipeg, he plans all this stuff for us to just spend time together, and, takes me for dinners and breakfasts and football games, for walks and stuff like that. And we just spend that quality time together, and it's so different once you have that restoration in your hearts between one another. When you live in relationship with your family, you get stuck in these ruts and these ways that you maybe feel like work because you've been doing them for so long. But when you allow God to come into your heart and show you His ways, His kingdom ways for family, it changes everything.